this evening, so I guess we can go ahead and get started. Good evening, everyone. Let's see, do we have exec session minutes? Oh, I don't see any, okay. Just a couple things to talk about in the pre-meeting, and I guess we want to talk about some potential upgrades to the event center. Carter, you want to take us through that?
I'd be happy to, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, good evening. We've talked about these couple of projects before, and as a matter of fact, at various points, council has authorized some budget for these projects and that sort of thing. We've had some problem getting them funded appropriately, and that problem continues tonight, and so we'd like to talk to you about an alternative to potentially move forward with these projects. One of the things that I wanted to bring to your attention, if you haven't seen it already, Mr. Cortez was successful in getting some grant money toward the metal detectors project, which I think is fabulous. The only problem is it's not enough, and so we would like to talk to you about the delta there. The other problem is with respect to the LED lighting project for the event center. We all have discussed, and I think it was during the Capitol meetings back in the spring, the possibilities relating to converting the lighting at the event center and taking advantage not only of the incentive program offered through Rocky Mountain Power, but of course lower operational costs with more efficient lighting and so on. The problem is that project was significantly under budgeted, and we need to talk to you about that. So if I could have Tim kind of walk us through some of those details and take your questions, and then we'd love to see what direction you have afterward.
So I guess to start with the metal detector, Mayor and Council, I put in for the full amount to get all the metal detectors purchased through Homeland Security. They just had a lot of requests, and so they came back and said, hey, we can't give it all to you, but we'll do half. And so, it's like, all right, so we don't have to take the money, but obviously get half paid for is good. That purchase is about we're running about $4,000 a piece. The event center staff tells me that, what we really need is 6 to do it appropriately. So that's what the first request is, and as Carter mentioned, the delta on that is about, we're looking at about $10,000 that we're short to purchase all 6. The second piece is the LED lighting project. We have talked about this 2 different times. The initial project was budgeted based on an estimate we got from Rocky Mountain Power. So we used the best possible information we had at the time to put in our request to you for capital, and that was just short of $100,000. Now, since then, we've hired an electrical engineer, and what that electrical engineer gave us was a lot clearer vision, if you will, and what needed to be done and what didn't need to be done and how to do it. And so as a result of that, we're just under budgeted on that by quite a bit, which is about $96,000. That's without the contingency portion that we would like to have in place. The good thing is that although these projects, one's not budgeted for at all and one's grossly under budgeted, the good thing is that we saw great savings in some of our pool liner projects within the rec side of the house. And basically what it comes down to is we had a lot of money budgeted to get 2 pool liners replaced at Marion Kreiner and a PV, and those projects came in about $100,000 under budget. So that's kind of what I offer you today. We'd sure like to see the LED project, lighting project get done, because as the city manager pointed out, we would see great savings in the electrical costs of the event center. Just so you know, that's about $14,000 a month is on average what we shell out just for electricity for the event center. So to find an opportunity to dim the lights when they're not needed, or take banks of lights out of the equation, if you will, on a daily basis really appeals to us and the management up there. One of the things that we didn't know about until just yesterday was the electrical engineer came back and said, hey, if we want to do these wireless controls, you're going to be able to have dimmable features. You can be able to take banks of lights out of service when you don't need them. As he pointed out, there's only really one event where we have everything on full blast and that's for CNFR because of the ESPN coverage. So as a result of that, really a lot of our shows, you know, we could have half the lights out, not functioning at all, or doing very little, and then kind of customize those features to kind of really for the show, and then save the money for electrical costs. So in a nutshell, that's kind of where we're at. I'd open it up for questions.
Questions? Steve?
If we spend this money and then the operating costs go down, obviously that lowers the subsidy that we give. Now, based on the contract that we have, if I recall right, then actually Spectra gets a percentage of that. Now, is that appropriate? Since we are spending the money, we should get all of that, shouldn't we? You know, they were supposed to do operational things to reduce cost, to then get their buck in. But seems like we're spending $200K plus then whatever the electrical savings is for them to get 20% of it.
Any comment, Carter?
Al, Mr. Mayor, Councilman Kathy, I really like the way you think, and next time we negotiate that contract, I want you in the room.
Unfortunately, I was there the last time, but who thought about this?
We are in a shared savings relationship with the event center, and so
Oh, yeah.
Tim, unless you understand differently, they would gain part of that benefit as we would.
20%.
20%.
Okay.
Bob?
Just two quick questions. You said $14K per month roughly. Is that our saving or is that our bill?
That's our bill. per
Okay,
month.
so I'm assuming that we're on demand metering for the event center, which means that you pay for the amps going in on 20-minute increments or something like that, whatever it is. So we ought to lower our demand because the inrush on LEDs is a lot less than it is for
That is my understanding, Councilman. I'm not an expert on that demand stuff, but they did say that when we fire everything up, there's a demand charge.
I know, I get what you're talking about.
And so, Mr. Mayor, Councilman, I think with the control system that is being proposed, we would have a much greater opportunity to manipulate the consumption and the consumption time that would help us to avoid those upcharges that typically comes with those demand modeling. So that would absolutely be my hope, which would mean that we could capitalize on those savings even further if we do it right.
Kind of a follow-up to that, you're talking about some control systems. Are they gonna have them centralized so that we can do that? Like, you can't put all the lights on at once unless it's an emergency. Like, they have to be separated by 20 minutes or something before you turn them all on, and that lowers your inrush current by a bunch.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, that would be what I would hope for.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a wireless system. It sounds pretty cutting edge. I'm looking forward to seeing what it can do if we have the tolerance for what that's going to cost.
So power management is part of having our electrical engineering involved?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We currently have the lighting system that was installed with the building in the early 1980s, right, Tim?
Correct, Mr. Mayor.
Have you done any computations on payback time?
Great question, Mr. Mayor. And I actually asked that of the electrical engineer, and I just got my answer yesterday. Unfortunately, he can't calculate it because they don't really have the data to support, like, hey, it reduces at X number, because every building's different. Every building has different events, and there's just a whole variety of factors, so he shouldn't really give us anything that he could commit to. What he did say, though, in the memo that I got from him was that by doing the wireless controls and installing them now while they're at the factory and then they come to us all ready to go, we would save about 2 or 3 times what it would cost us to do that same project later. So say in 5 years we wanted to do it, we'd be looking at over $100,000 to get wireless controls installed versus if we wanted to do it now and spend the $35,000.
Essentially, this would be almost revenue neutral, just shifting costs from.
Mr. Mayor, anecdotally, I can tell you that past computations that we've done, in less than 10 years, it would be budget neutral.
I mean, as far as the pool liners, money being
Oh,
coming over.
correct, yeah, sorry. I
We don't
misunderstood.
really have to budget any additional funds, 10,000, I guess, for the metal detectors?
Mr. Mayor, actually, the amount that we're looking to reallocate would cover the metal detectors and the lighting project in its entirety. And then have some extra that go back to 1 cent funding for future projects.
What will we need to do? Do we need to make any formal decision, or is it just an internal budgetary matter to?
Mr. Mayor, if council's ready to give us direction tonight, we would take that direction and either move forward or wait to bid the projects again. Whatever you'd like to see happen.
Councilman Bates has pointed out we have other priorities, but go ahead.
We do, but I just wanted to know, will, by doing the metal detectors, is that gonna take away the staffing that use the wand or that checks the bags, or are we replacing them with the metal detectors in a sense? I mean,
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, I couldn't say that we won't reduce any staffing at all, but we still would have people there to monitor the station as people walk through and collect things and give them back to them and stuff like that. So, you know, I can't tell you if on an average day, if we have 15 people at the security checkpoints, if we're gonna be down to, if it's still 15 or if it's down to 12. I couldn't really tell you.
I mean, I'm sure we'll keep the
stuff-
staff. I was just wondering if instead of having somebody wand you, it's just a metal detector.
It'll be faster is what I get. Operationally speaking, people can just deposit their stuff, walk through, and it's just a faster operation versus the wanding, which does take some additional time.
Just in terms of where we are these days, Tim, is it fairly common for facilities like the event center to have this technology? Are we ahead of the game, behind the times, with the way we're doing things?
Mr. Mayor, I get the sense that we're probably behind on both, meaning security wise, you know, we've, in central Wyoming, we're kind of lax that way. We did get a lot of pushback when Spectre instituted that portion, you know, security screening. I think ever since the Las Vegas massacre, it's been pretty mainstream now, and people, you know, we've had to kind of pick up our game to catch up. And then with respect to the lighting, I would say the same thing, meaning most states and other parts that we see venues of this nature, they are power, you know, they're really trying to reduce the power consumption, not just because of the financial impact, but because of the sustainability with regard to the planet and that type of thing. So I would say we're probably both. Steve?
A little bit along the lines of your question. Now, granted, they are bigger venues, but Busch Stadium, NRG, Minute Maid, Mile High, Pepsi Center, all of those have metal detection walkthrough. I've been through all of them in the last few years. So I know, yeah. And this is as far back like Busch Stadium was 4 years ago, 5 years ago even. So, yeah.
Other comments,
And-
questions?
And along somebody's, there'd have been Mr. Bates's, basically the people that continually can't get through will have to be wanded, so you will still have the person with the wand there. And then there's idiots like me that have to be patted down.
Well, what do people think? You're asking us to decide now to give you the green light if we want to move forward?
If we could.
Concerns? Where's the money coming from? It's a unspent amount on the pool liners, basically. We've budgeted significantly more on the pool liners than was needed, which I guess is a good thing. And, so we wouldn't have to allocate any additional funds unless the majority felt that money should be spent somewhere else.
Well, and
Steve?
if I heard Tim right, so it'll be money going back into the 1% fund. It just makes sense to me that we do get these metal detectors and get them in place. LED lights obviously will have a savings of some sort, and if we're putting money back and we're able to take care of these, it makes sense to me to move forward on it.
We have invested a lot of money in the event center over the last 10 years. May as well finish the job, is kind of my opinion. So, I don't know, thumbs up on, okay.
Thank you.
All right, unanimous. Thanks, Jim. So, Metro Road speed data, Carter?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the other roads that council asked us to look into was with respect to Metro Road. We did run some speed analysis on that road, and indeed it does appear that the traveling public in that corridor would prefer 40 miles per hour versus 30. And in fact, we found that 85% are more in the 40 mile per hour range than they are the 30 mile per hour range. And so generally speaking, that's how we set some of those corridors that aren't in a default speed zone position or school zone kind of area or whatever. And so if it pleases the council, we'd like to move forward and start making the changes to that road as well in a real similar fashion and process that we're experiencing right now with King Boulevard and 2nd Street.
No hesitation there, Councilman Cathy.
I think I was the one that brought it up.
That seems to make sense to me.
Just a quick question along, not on this issue, we gotta proceed with it, but have we heard any more about our friends to the east about putting a dirt road up to our road? Or
Well, you know, Mr. Mayor, I haven't heard much along those lines in quite some time. So I'm not totally sure where they're at, to be honest. I couldn't tell you. Have you heard, Mr. Mayor?
Have not.
We have a meeting coming up, and I could certainly ask with the
I
mayor.
think it's something that, quite honestly, I think they had a good argument to try and do that, as long as we don't have any money on it. I think that's a good idea.
Absolutely.
I'm a tightwad, I can't help it. I don't have any money.
Yes.
I probably have.
Meet all these folks.
Absolutely.
I'm sure you know most of them, but. Okay, agenda review. Any questions, concerns about tonight's agenda? Apparently not had no negative feedback about the annexation. Is that correct, Craig?
Correct.
Okay. Hopefully that will go smoothly.
No executive session. Might be at dinner time Tuesday.
Oh, yeah. Well, and then too, I didn't.
I do have a quick question. When it comes to the annexation, if I read in
The
there
meeting
correctly,
doesn't last
there's
at least an hour. He votes no.
If
That
it's
adjournment.
a citizen, if
You remember
the
that?
property owner brings the annexation up, then it has to go through planning and zoning, but because we're doing it, we don't, or we didn't. Is there, what's the reason? Why is there a difference in going through the process, planning and zoning process, if it's not brought up by us?
I'm not totally sure what the motivation is with regard to the way that the statute is written in that regard. But if either of you had some insight there?
Mr. Mayor, I think the state statute just speaks to the council approval. It doesn't actually specify it has to go to planning commission, although we think that's a good idea and generally want to do that. In this case, I think the motivation was to try to get it through before the census. I think we did a bare minimum on this to try to get as many people in the city as possible.
And really instead just having public hearings so they had an opportunity to
Correct.
express their
They
concerns.
still had the public hearings and we reached out and did the public meetings and all that, so we felt that they still had adequate ability to speak to us and get their concerns heard.
Okay. Then we'll take a couple minutes and start at 6. I now call the December 3rd, 2019 regular council meeting to order. Would council members please denote your presence? Oh, excuse me. The chair would entertain a motion to, by minute action, excuse the absence of Councilman Huber and Vice Mayor Johnson.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Hopkins, seconded by Councilman Friel. Please cast your vote, and please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passed.
And just a reminder that our meetings are televised on cable channel 192. We have some young people with us tonight. welcome. Would you guys like to join me in leading this group of people in the Pledge of Allegiance? Of course you would. Come on up. That was sort of a question. Just face the flag here. And whenever you guys are ready. Thank you all.
Oh, hey, John, turn that.
Thank you.
The chair would entertain a motion to approve by minute action the minutes of the November 19th, 2019 regular council meeting as published in the Casper Star Tribune on November 29th, 2019.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Pacheco, seconded by Councilwoman Lutz. Any amendments to those minutes? If not, please cast your vote. Please cast your vote and record the vote.
All members voting aye, motion passed.
Thank you. Chair will entertain a motion to approve by minute action the minutes of the November 19th, 2019 executive session.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councilman Cathy, seconded by Councilman Bates. Any amendments to those minutes? Please cast your vote and please record the vote.
All members voting aye, motion passed.
The chair would now entertain a motion to approve by minute action the December 3rd, 2019 bills and claims as audited by City Manager Napier.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Friel, seconded by Councilman Bates. Any abstentions? Please cast your vote and please record the vote.
All members voting aye, motion passed.
Well, we again would like to welcome back members of Troop 1839 to our meeting. We enjoyed hearing from you at our last meeting. Would you care to address council again this evening? You would. Great. We'd like to hear from you. You're going to give us some good ideas, right? We are ready. We can use good ideas. Come on up to the podium and tell us about your ideas.
Good evening. We hope you all had a good Thanksgiving. Again, we'd like to thank you for all the work you do behind the scenes to help our city run. So when we came here 2 weeks ago, you guys asked us what we thought would make Casper a better place to live. We've asked our friends, family, and people in this troop what they think. Our troop is ages range from 5 to 13 years old. Here's our top 5 suggestions.
We would like to expand the ice arena so kids aren't staying up as late, because I know figure skating has to get up at 5:30 in the morning just to go to practice, and hockey and stuff have to practice until 10 o'clock at night. And usually that's on a school night, and we still have to go to school for 7 hours and do schoolwork, and that's kind of hard on us. More public restrooms for downtown, and littering.
Just being more aggressive about picking up the litter?
Yes.
Is that what you're saying? Okay.
What else? Expanding homeless services, not only for kids, but for adults too. Hogadon is a winter place. We would like to see it all used all year round for like bike trails, zip lining, and more stuff like that. And then more family entertainment that's family friendly for all ages and for little kids too.
We'd like to thank you for taking our ideas into consideration, and if there's any way we can help our ideas along, we're interested in that. That's all we have to say.
Before we excuse you, could we get your names, please?
I'm Madeline Bates.
Emma Litke.
Great job. Do we have questions? You may have some questions. We're not going to let you off the hook that quickly. Does anyone have any questions for these fine young women? Okay, Councilman Pacheco.
So a couple questions for you. One is, what was your guys' process to come up with some of these ideas to generate what you thought Casper needed?
So last time, Councilman Bates asked us that, and we really didn't have an answer for him. So we thought this time we should have an answer. And so my mom and I were sitting in the car, and she said, well, your uncle asked you, what do you think Casper could be a better place? And she said, family entertainment. And I said, that's a really good idea. I think I'm going to share that.
We also brainstormed a lot with our troop and asked like our family and stuff for ideas, what everybody thinks might help make it better.
Good, very good. I'm glad you guys are here doing that. Appreciate it.
Thank you all for that input, and all of you that participated. Those were excellent ideas, some of which we are currently working on, as a matter of fact. So thank you. We also have a proclamation for you to honor Wyoming Women's Suffrage Week. So, once again, could you guys come on up to the dais, and I'm going to read the proclamation to you, okay?
Up and down and up and down.
Warn people, this one has 4 whereases, a little below average, so that's a good thing. Whereas the territory of Wyoming passed the first law granting women the right to vote and hold public office on December 10, 1869, more than 50 years prior to the United States ratification of the 19th Amendment on August 18, 1920. And whereas on September 6, 1870, Louisa Ann Swain became the first woman to cast a vote in a general election. And whereas November 2nd, 1920 saw over 8 million women vote in the first national election which allowed their vote. And whereas during the 2018 midterm election, over 55% of eligible women voted, which equaled 65.3 million women. It was the largest turnout in number and percentage in a midterm in over 50 years and potentially ever. Now therefore I, Charles Plow, Mayor of the City of Casper, Wyoming, do hereby proclaim December 9th to December 13th, 2019 as Wyoming Women's Suffrage Week, and ask that women, men, boys, and girls recognize and celebrate the 150-year anniversary of including women's voices and votes at the table, both locally and nationally, in our political decision-making. Our nation, our people, and our system are better off with everyone's inclusion. In witness whereof I have hereunto set my hand and caused the official seal of the City of Casper, Wyoming to be affixed this 3rd day of December 2019, signed Charlie Powell, Mayor of Casper. Let me sign this and I'll get it to you just a second. There you go. Thank you all for coming. Pretty cool. Now is the time we invite anyone in the audience who wishes to speak to the council to come forward. As stated on the first page of the agenda, we ask the following. Please state your name and address. Please direct your questions to me as mayor. Please no personal attacks on staff or council. We will not respond to personnel matters. And please keep your comments limited to 5 minutes. Good evening. There's a familiar face.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. First of all, driving down here tonight, a special thanks to you and the city staff for these beautiful light displays that we see in Conwell Park and downtown. It surely does look festive and nice.
Let's tell everybody who you are.
Oh, my name is Roberta Mundell, M-U-N-D-E-L-L. I live at 3850 East 14th Street, Unit G, for Grandma. And next, I want to offer my congratulations to Councilman Friel and Councilwoman Lutz on the winning of the straw poll for the mayor and the vice mayor position. I come tonight to you to speak to you all about the proposed increase in the mayoral salary, as I so read in the Friday edition of the Star Tribune, which I think was the last newspaper we got until this morning. You as a council should really consider the optics of such a move. We are in a tight financial position. While the increase for the mayor's salary doesn't really adversely affect the overall budget, the proposed increase of $50 to $100 per official meeting really represents a 25 to 50% increase in salary. And then will the rest of the council think that they too deserve a raise as well? This action would result in a major budget impact. How does it appear to the businesses who are laying off employees or even worse, shuttering their doors, resulting in a job loss? Being elected to City Council by your fellow citizens is an honor and a privilege. When you ran for office, you knew the compensation amount. You also knew that you would be participating in many community events representing the city. Most of them are unpaid events. But again, you are a city leader, and leadership needs to be shown on this issue. Casper operates on a weak mayoral system. Raises to the mayor and/or council pay scale should only come after we have sufficient police and fire force, potholes are fixed, and at this time of the year, some secondary streets in the neighborhoods are plowed. We are not Denver, Boise, or Salt Lake City. This week, we have felt we are a Wyocity Island floating in the sea of snow and wind. We need you to lead with conservative sensibilities. Muhammad Ali stated, "Service is the rent you pay for the space that you occupy on this earth. Serving on city council and being elected mayor is a service opportunity." Council, I ask you to consider what I have stated and do not give the mayor or yourselves, for that matter, any raise. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Questions for Ms. Mundell? Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Hank Schwartz, and I'm here to throw my opinion on 2nd Street speed limit. But before I start, the one thing I would like to do is compliment this young lady that said proper English. She stated, "my mom and I." It wasn't me and my mom, it was my mom and I. And I have to compliment her on using proper English. It's so forgotten today. But anyway, my idea on 2nd Street is from Jefferson to Wilson, remain 20 miles per hour. From 1st Street to 4th Street, remain 20 miles per hour. This allows people that are driving to slow down. If there's a pedestrian, it gives them the time to stop, let the pedestrian cross. It gives people in and exiting and entering the hospital emergency area access without getting slammed into. And it allows people, again, to stop and allow ambulances through. So, you know, it's happened to me several times. I live in that area. And it happens several times. Ambulances try to get out, but at 30 miles an hour, I wouldn't be able to stop. and allow that ambulance access to the street. At 20 miles an hour, I have had that happen several times where I was able to stop and put my emergency flashers on and let the ambulance out. My other idea on 2nd Street, I have lived here since 1998, and I cannot name you 5 stores that are downtown because of the way they got that dadgum thing serpentined. You don't dare to take your eye off the road. I'm the principal driver, the only driver in the household, and a single person, so all the driving is left up to me. And when I'm driving down 2nd Street downtown, I don't have time to turn my head, even for 2 seconds, to see what stores are down there. Because of the way that the road is designed, I'm either going to hit a pedestrian or a parked car, or I'm going to hit somebody head on. And I am not going to take that chance. I would rather shop at the mall than try to drive that asinine 2nd Street serpentine. The way it's designed, whoever thought of that didn't have apparently common sense. He might have had a college education, but no common sense. And that's voicing my opinion.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Schwartz? Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Gabriel Green. I live at 5041 Pay It Forward Drive. I too will be discussing the speed limit, but in a little bit different of a light. So, Mr. Mayor and members of the council, I'd first like to commend you on what I've seen in this town. I was away from 2014 to 2018 for college, and in even that window, it's amazing what Casper has done. Many people have also come up here to commend you. So, like, downtown is obvious, but the east side is growing. Like, all of Casper is booming. Hopefully that'll help us the next time we have a bus to have a little bit of a buffer there. While I could speak in praise for a long while, that is unfortunately not why I'm here. Even more unfortunately, I plan to voice an unpopular opinion given what I've seen and heard from other people on the speed limit change. To be clear though, I don't think that you made the wrong decision changing it back. Councilmember Kathy and others brought up to me that accidents had actually increased on that road after the change. So if the whole goal of the law was to increase public safety, it wasn't doing so. So changing the law back does in fact make sense. What I'd like to address though are what I see as 3 distinct dangers to our republic for which the flag stands that I think that this law change actually reflects. I want to be clear. I'm not trying to be hyperbolic or say that this change alone is like bringing down our republic, but I think that what it embodies is some symptoms that are very threatening to us. And again, like, I'm not trying to be hyperbolic. People don't trip over mountains, they trip over molehills. So it's these little things that inculcate habits of the mind in our people that actually determine the fate of our nation. Dealing with the law itself, as I said, I don't want to get bogged down in the specifics. I'm not sure if it was a good law because it clearly wasn't affecting safety in the way we wanted. But since Athens, we've known that democracies are the most powerful form of government because they're capable of doing great things. They energize the entire population in accomplishing great deeds because they're involved in that government. They feel that they have a say, and so they have to contribute. That is our strength. But the weakness of these systems, also evident since Athens and even before, is that they can't stick to things for very long. We're distracted by the next flashy thing. We want a better speed limit today. We want better prisons tomorrow. We want Hogan to be open during the day the next day, and we can't stick by things, and that is the greatest weakness of our system, and it's why when we compete against people like Vladimir and Xi, who have lifetime dictatorships in place, we often struggle. We get maybe a year, and in this case, less than a year to try out a new idea, while they get a lifetime to dedicate themselves to something. So in this instance, I don't think that we might have given this law enough time. With 1 year of data, in fact, less than 1 year of data, I don't know if we can accurately say that the law was good or not. We had more snows that apparently affected construction rates and have caused us to give extensions in time to construction companies. So maybe that affected accident rates. Maybe, as council members brought up, there were people who didn't want to respect the law, and they decided they were going to go 30 miles an hour, other people went 20, and that is a recipe for disaster on any roadway anywhere in the world. So like, I don't know if we gave the law enough time. That's the first danger, is our country is very, very whim-based, not reason-based, and so I think that we might have changed too fast. The second thing that I would like to bring in is, as mentioned by the council members, there were members of the city who weren't following the law, and that's part of why it didn't work. Now, we are a democratic system. Our society is democratic even if we have a Republican form of government. So it's probably good that we bowed to the whims of the people. We shouldn't have laws that they don't want. But it seems to me that they weren't educated enough, that they didn't understand the law. And according to many people that I've met, people think that you are allowed to go 5 miles over the speed limit before you get a ticket. That's not true. Cops can give you a ticket for going 31 and a 30, but people assume you can go 5 over. Of course, the danger of this is if I assume I can go 35 and a 30, and then I'm like, well, the speed limit's actually 35, so I'll go 40 and a 30, and next thing you know, it kind of spirals. So the second danger that I see is that by changing the law back so quickly, you didn't show these people that they had to follow the law next time. You showed them that they don't have to follow the law, and we'll just change it back to accommodate them, not to accommodate logic and reason. We did not give this law enough time, I think, and on top of that, we only taught the wrong lesson to our fellow citizens. And finally, the third danger, and this is the one where I'm gonna get really convoluted, and I apologize for that. I think that we have a fundamental disregard for the law in this country, and it starts with things like speed limits, but it extends all the way into every level of government and every level of institution. Our society is supposed to be based on the idea of consent of the governed deriving the laws. We all get together, we come up with the laws that we want to create, and we respect those laws because we were involved in their creation. But right now, we live in a society where the only reason people follow little codes like jaywalking, speed limits, littering is because of fear of fines and enforcement, not because they actually respect the law. In a nation like ours, I understand, we are supposed to be based on justice. We are not supposed to be based on power. If we are supposed to be based on power, let's elect our own SHE, have them be in charge forever, and not have to care anymore. We are supposed to be involved in the law, and we are supposed to respect the law, but we do not. And while, again, I don't think that we're going to have anarchy tomorrow because we changed the law today, I do think it's reflective of a deep-seated issue in our nation where people do not understand the laws that they have, and they do not respect them. Most people assume that we have a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit because it's safer for pedestrians. But speaking from personal-ish experience with a little brother who was hit by a car going less than 20 miles an hour, it's still dangerous. The reason the speed limits are set isn't to protect pedestrians, but to ensure consistent traffic flow and efficient traffic according to traffic lights that are based on those speed limits. Nobody understands that, so nobody respects the speed limits. And it's these deep-seated issues that I think threaten the very core of our nation and the very core of our society. Thank you.
Questions for Mr. Green? Mr. Green, what ward do you live in?
I live in Ward 3.
Don't know if we have anybody going off in Ward 3. I know we have people going off in Ward 1 and Ward 2. I was going to tell you there's an election next fall. So, but welcome back, and your thoughts are well considered. And any other questions or comments for Mr. Green? Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Tom Hall. I live on 4017 Somerset Circle, and I'm employed for the school district as a full-time bus driver. I'm not here representing the school district, but as a concerned citizen, employee, father, and a grandfather of this city. I drive approximately 300 miles per week within the city limits, carrying hundreds of students that are not required to wear seat belts. Safety is my main concern for the students and my family and friends. I'm here to bring to your attention and to heighten your awareness of the total disregard for the laws that are being broken on a daily basis here on the streets of Casper. I believe we are turning a blind eye to the fact that the drivers in this city are ignoring the laws set in this city because of the lack of law enforcement personnel. As a licensed driver, I am required to stay within the laws set forth by the state of Wyoming, as are all who carry driver's licenses. Ignorance is not a liable excuse for abusing the law. I see on a daily basis drivers ignore the law when it comes to stop signs, traffic lights, merging into oncoming traffic, lane changes, use of turn signals, speed limits, and most importantly, school zones. Stop signs to motorists are just a suggestion for the majority of drivers. A good example is when I park my school bus picking up the Dean Morgan students. I park on Spruce and 14th, and I'm facing a four-way stop, and driver after driver just totally ignores the stop signs there. And this is why the students are dismissed crossing the street, both north and southbound. And that's just one corner of one school out of a dozen plus. Traffic lights are ignored as well when it comes to complete stops. Again, taking the law as a suggestion when it comes to complete stops prior to turning right. At major intersections, this is a major safety concern. Running red lights is a common occurrence. I can understand that police presence is not an option at most major intersections due to nowhere to be observed. But one thing I noticed there in Boulder, Colorado a few years ago was they had electronic surveillance cameras posted on their traffic lights, and it flagged motorists and issued automatic citations to the owner of the driver. Illegal lane changes, again, are also commonly taking place. Again, I see this on a daily basis, and at 5:05 p.m., it's a major concern for this man here. The use of turn signals is also a written law. Minor as it might seem to some, it is still required by law by the use of turning, lane changing, and merging into traffic. Totally ignored by most and taken again as suggestions for drivers. And most importantly is the school zones. School zone signs, blinking amber lights, stop signs, and red lights activated on the buses and speed limits are there for the safety of our children. Again, I am a witness to drivers ignoring the laws. The school bus hub is a great example. Center Street and David Street with the school zone signs and amber lights on each street. There has been over 100 drivers on David Street recorded already on video, passing the red lights on school buses while loading and unloading children. That's just at the hub. The city of Casper needs to and must do the right thing and put a stop to this starting tomorrow. If Casper law enforcement doesn't start now and send a message to the drivers up to date, then we are sending a bad message to those that are getting their licenses tomorrow. Right now, they are learning from what they are seeing. Another concern I have is pertaining to the traffic lights in this city. Just the ones I come across that are inefficient is on 12th and Walcott, 13th and Walcott, 12th and McKinley, 5th and Center, lights on CY and Poplar, 12th and Poplar, Walcott and College Drive. The list goes on. We need improvement in this area here to keep up with today's traffic. Thank you for your time.
Questions for Mr. Hall? Serious concerns, sir. Thank you for bringing those to our attention. Mr. City Manager, now with the police department, we had a traffic coordinator identified, and then we didn't have that position, but we recently refilled that, didn't we, to get that unit back up to speed?
Mr. Mayor, we do have a traffic unit, but to the extent that you might be envisioning, I'm not sure that I could answer exactly what you might be thinking of.
Just trying to remember, because I know we had some staffing changes. So, thank you, sir. Anyone else here to speak this evening? Mr. Lamont, we haven't seen you in a while. It's good to
see Mr. Hopkins. Good to see Mr. Cathy. I haven't met you two. I hear good things about you. Good to see you, Raymond. I see Mr. Huber. Mr. Johnson not here tonight, so give him my regards, will you please?
Mr. Huber is suffering on the beaches of Hawaii.
Pardon? You're in Hawaii?
He's in Hawaii.
That's not
yes.
fair. I tell you, that snow on the mountain, Hogan needs to open right now. You miss a lot of revenue. Steve, it's good to see you back. Really good to see you back. So, you know, we get a little informal when I'm here, so I hope you go with that, okay? So I have to agree with all these guys. That isn't why I'm here, but we don't need a racetrack. If you spend any time in a hospital bed on the front side of that hospital, it's kind of nice to have the 20-mile-an-hour zone. Because when you're out there looking at that park, trying to keep your sanity, that park looks beautiful. They lit it up the other night, didn't they? I haven't been by there. I'll do that tonight. But let's not make a racetrack out of 2nd Street, okay? You've heard from the rest of these people, but I'm telling you that loud and clear. That's been 20 miles an hour, and look at the terrible accidents we've had there. So let's don't do it. So I'm going to start off. You know, I appreciate some inside help. Me and the chief back there are pretty good friends, as I am with a lot of others. He's a good choice, a very good choice. And there's rumors around town he got ran off down in Farmington. That's not true at all. He left there with accolades like you wouldn't believe. I worked with a few people that worked with him down there at the federal level. I'm not making that up. I've been here time after time. Charlie, you get it. And I appreciate you telling Miss Tabby up there at CWCC I was the most sane guy I talked that night when we were going through the stuff over at the convent, okay? I appreciate that. I'm forever grateful to you. Raymond, you're my hero, okay? So, you, dear, you're a good gal. You look good sitting in that mayor's chair, okay? You look real good. So, and I don't mean that to be chauvinistic, okay? So I'd really like to thank the help that sent the 5 memos to the 5 people that voted for Mr. Friel here. Thank you. Appreciate that. That was a good thing. So moving on. Don't shoot the messenger here. I got a twin brother. Mr. Friel talked to him and slammed the phone up down on it. His name's Jonas Jones. He went with my mother and I went with my father. Don't you ever take my mother's name in vain again, partner. Ever. That's not a threat, okay? Now moving on. Word's all over town. Tracy John Lamont's not running for county commissioner. He changed his site. That's now the new operational site for a sting that's going on. A federal sting. I'm going to read you a letter I sent to my good friend Mark Gordon, the governor. I've been working with him for a long time. I helped him. He introduced himself at one of the mining associates' legislative dinners way back when he wanted to run for governor the first time. I got to tell you, his new attorney general is the most courageous woman in the world for releasing that DCI report. And I got to tell you, if my good friend Steve Schultz here, you know, he did the right thing costing the chief's job because you were manipulated. I know why. We're not going to embarrass that lady. I call for her resignation here, just like I'm calling for his right now. I'm going to let him out of here with his dignity because I didn't get mine. So moving on, I appreciate the time. Carter, let me shake your hand. Yeah, I want to thank whoever was involved, and it was you, for getting me a 60-gun, armed gun, honor guard leaving the courthouse back when my life was threatened. And I owe my life to Steve Schultz and Richard Brown. I call him the sly red fox, but he doesn't hide a secret very well, okay? So I was whisked away to WBI that day, and the 2 officers had put me in their car. They're 2 of Casper's finest. Said, where do you want to go for a little joyride, Tracy, because you're going to be tucked away for at least a month. You know who my first roommate was at WBI? A U.S. attorney, a good U.S. attorney, not the employer of Mark Trimble. So, moving on, okay? Give me time. Let me go extra, Charlie. This is important. So last time I was speaking, I missed you guys
please.
bad. So, you know, let me cross off the list here. Mr. Bates, how do you pronounce your first name?
Kristen Lutz.
That's a beautiful name, okay? So, and we got that. We got that. That took care of that page. I've really missed coming in to see you guys. I'll give you a little secret. The county commissioners, when you moved your, and I'm pleading with you right now, you need to move your public comment section back to the back. That's why I haven't been here. And we need to move the meetings. We need to separate those. That was done by design years ago before any of the rest of you were here. And there'd be more people.
Lamont, I'm going to give you another 30 seconds, okay?
Okay. So if you could do that. But I'll leave it at this. The Facebook page, Tracy John Lamont, comma, okay? Natrona County Watchdog Committee of the FCID, which stands for the Federal Citizen Intelligence Division of the Department of Justice. I've served for 33 years, and that's no bullshit. Thank you for your time, folks.
Okay, thank you. Questions for Mr. Lamont? Thank you, sir. It's good to have you back.
Those aren't mine.
Anyone here? Anyone else here to speak to council? Okay. I'm just going to address a couple of things before we move on. Is Robin still out there? No, she left, huh?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I want to own the suggestion that we increase the mayor's compensation to $300 a meeting, which is the state maximum. And it's just based on my experiences over the past year. And I don't think that compensation has been changed in 20 years, maybe longer. And it's not just the time, it's wear and tear on vehicles, and I just thought it was appropriate to give the succeeding mayor that additional compensation. So, and the comments regarding the 2nd Street, Mr. Schwartz, actually part of the downtown study involved taking out the serpentine, which would be very expensive, obviously, but a recommendation for parallel parking versus diagonal parking for the very reasons that he mentioned. So I don't know what we do about I think we discussed those speed limits as much as we could discuss them, and the comments were overwhelmingly in favor of the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. So I think we'll probably leave that for now. So there's no other comment, and we'll move on to our public hearings. So I now declare the public hearing open for the consideration of city-initiated annexation of 13 properties. Mr. City, did I skip something?
Yes, establishing public hearings.
Oh, dang, I did that again, huh? Oh, there they are. My bad. I'm sorry. Please read the consent agenda titles.
Establishing December 17th, 2020 as the public hearing date for consideration of the following 3 items. Item 8A1A, the transfer of ownership of retail liquor license number 36 owned by Urban Market Wines, LLC, doing business as Urban Bottle Wine and Spirits, located at 410 South Ash Street. Item 8A1B, new bar and grill liquor license number 12 for Adega, LLC, doing business as Qdoba Mexican Eats, located at 5030 East 2nd Street. Item 8A1C, new bar and grill liquor license number 13 for EDG, LLC, doing business as Qdoba Mexican Eats, located at 4009 CY Avenue, and establishing February 18th, 2020 as a public hearing date for consideration of the liquor license renewals for licensing period April 1st, 2020 through March 31st, 2021.
Thank you. The chair would entertain a motion to, by minute action, establish the public hearing dates just read.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councilman Cathy, seconded by Councilman Hopkins. Any abstentions or nay votes? Councilman Friel.
Thank you, Mayor. I will abstain from 8A1B and 8A1C.
Okay. Thank you. With that abstention, please cast your vote. And please record the vote.
With the abstention of Councilmember Friel noted, motion passed.
I now declare the public hearing open for the consideration of the city-initiated annexation of 13 properties. Mr. City Attorney, do you have exhibits?
Thank you, Your Honor. We have 3 exhibits. Exhibit number 1, correspondence from Liz Becker to J. Carter Napier, dated November 27, 2019. Exhibit number 2, affidavit of publication is published in the Casper Star Tribune, dated November 18, 2019, regarding notice of public hearing date. And exhibit number 3, affidavit of publication, is published in the Casper Star Tribune, dated November 18, 2019, regarding the annexation report summary.
Thank you. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. The subject property in question that we're talking about for annexation consideration this evening in first reading, that will be reflected in your monitors here in a second, is with regard to 15 properties located on South Poplar, which is also south of 50th in that general vicinity, and Yesness Court, all that through there. The idea is that pursuant to the city's contiguity to the subject area and in relation to a number of the annexation agreements that are in place for the particular area, we are proposing that this be brought into the limits of the city. This annexation area is ideal in many ways in that there aren't any costs that would be taken on by the city in order for this portion of the community to be brought in. There shouldn't be any costs relating to the property owners either as it relates to their potential annexation. There's been some conversation that indeed citizens in this area would be required to hook into the city's sewer system, and that would only be upon the condition of their septic systems no longer being able to provide those types of services to their respective property. And the fact is as well that that would be required whether they are citizens of Casper or citizens of the county, residents of the county. We are proposing that pending this potential annexation, that the area be zoned in an agricultural classification so that indeed the uses of the various properties in question would not change and thereby requiring dramatic differences in the use of the land that is currently being enjoyed. Beyond that, Mr. Mayor, I would defer back to your body.
Thank you. Council will now listen to public comment. Public hearing comments are limited to 5 minutes, and please note duplication of speakers. At this time, I would ask those individuals who wish to speak in favor of the issues involving annexation to please approach the lectern. Is anyone here this evening to speak in favor? There being no one to speak in favor, I would now ask those individuals who wish to speak in opposition to the issues involving the annexation to please approach the lectern. Is anyone here to speak in opposition?
Mr. Mayor, Council.
Good evening, sir.
My name is Tracy Traxler. I'm at, 5350 South Poplar. I've been a resident at that address since 2005. I very much would like to continue to be a resident of the county. I have enjoyed being a neighbor to the city for that past 15 years, so I stand in opposition to the annexation.
Okay. Do you have,
Pardon me?
does anyone have any questions? Would you mind telling us what your main opposition is, sir?
I like the ability to function and live as a county resident without the restrictions of the city. I pay 1.5 times the rate for water. I don't avail myself of any other services I don't pay for, and I like things to, I would like for, for things to stay as they are now.
Okay. Any questions, Council? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Is anyone else here to speak in opposition to the issues involving the annexation? Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. My name is George Benson, live at 6680 South Poplar. It was made mention that there would be no expense borne by the owners of the property. As I understand it, if we were annexed into the city, our property taxes would go up. Is that not true?
I think we did some looking into that, didn't we, Mr. City Manager? There would be a slight increase, but the water rate increase would more than offset that, would it not?
The water rate.
Or decrease, I'm sorry.
Is that true?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, depending on the rates of consumption and so forth, I think it would relatively be a wash. Pardon the pun.
Depending upon how you value our property.
Well, we don't do that, you know. That's the assessor, so.
Well, I understand. Also, it's been brought to my attention, which was not in any of the documentation that was provided, that there is a statute, Wyoming Statute 15-1-406 B-D, that says if more than 50% of the landowners, or if a landowner or landowners owning more than 50% of the area to be annexed, file written objection with the clerk of the annexing municipality, in this case Casper, within 20 business days after the hearing, no further action may be taken in the area within the proposed annexation within 2 years.
Sure.
Is that being addressed?
Mr. Henley, I believe he's referring to the statute that would be an owner-initiated process versus a city-initiated process. Would I be correct?
I'm assuming that that's correct, Your Honor. I believe that this annexation is due primarily to the fact that there were outside water use agreements for the most part with these residents, which they agreed when they entered into that relationship with the city, that upon the request of council, which you have made, that they would come into the city without filing an objection.
Okay. If that in fact is the case, could those homeowners, since I don't think there's more than one or two out of the, is it 13 or 15, Carter? 15. All of our documents say 13. I don't think more than one or two of the 15 homeowners were there when those agreements were signed. Could we be provided with copies of those agreements?
Do we have those on file from the previous owners? Right. So.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, that indeed could be provided. You bet.
And I assume many of the people who purchased these properties weren't necessarily informed of those agreements. Would that be fair? We wouldn't have any control over that.
Right, so. But once the annexation was proposed, I would have thought that Craig or someone would have provided those to the homeowners to verify that we are subject to annexation under those terms rather than under the Wyoming statute.
Okay.
Fair enough?
Well, all you had to do is ask, and we'll get them to you.
Okay. All right. Other than that, I do agree with the zoning, should this take place. I don't think you're going to find a majority of the homeowners who want to be annexed into the city, but if we are, I do agree with the zoning that is proposed.
Okay.
So thank you.
Questions for Mr. Benson? Councilman Bates.
When there was a public meeting regarding that area, were you able to attend that?
I was out of town.
Okay. And if I may, Mayor, were you, sir, able to attend that, and you raised those concerns as well too at the public meeting?
I did not raise my objection at the time. It was fact-finding, and it was my understanding the meeting was to lay out the city's position.
Okay.
And I responded to what I thought was your position at the time.
Okay.
Other questions for Mr. Benson? Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We will get those documents to you.
Appreciate it.
Good evening.
Mr. Mayor, Council. My name is Jim Thorpe and I live at 6700 South Poplar Street. I grew up on Poplar Street, moved in there in '69, purchased my parents' home. It was about 2014. Anyway, lived there. I feel the same way as the first two speakers. I'm in opposition to the annexation for the same reasons. But as Mr. Benson said, if it does go through, the urban agricultural is, I think, a wise choice for that area.
Would you mind telling us what your objections are? Are you worried about the property tax increase or
the
what?
Property tax, use of the property, increased regulation, if you will. I don't think we're going to get any additional benefits. Road's not going to be plowed any better. No sidewalks, curb and gutter, things like that. I like it the way it is, and I don't wish for it to change.
Okay, thank you. Questions from Mr. Thorpen? Your father provided many invaluable years of service to this community.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm sure you have as well. I didn't mean to imply otherwise. Good evening.
She wants me to speak. I'm John Huff, and this is my bride, Wendy. She owns a house at 4400 South 5440, I'm sorry. Shows how tuned I am on that. Her concerns, and subsequently mine, are future uses of property. Urban agricultural sounds like a good classification if we do have to do that. My question is what is the advantage for the property owner over the city? Obviously, the city gets some sort of funding because of the added real estate into the city limits, but what is the advantage for the property owner? And I don't personally see one there by coming into the city there.
I think the only clear one is a reduction in water rates.
That increase property taxes.
So
it's a wash.
Okay.
So
But we don't.
there really is no benefit. It's basically a wash. But I feel the same way as the other gentleman that got up and spoke. You know, I've been up there for 16 years, and I enjoy the benefits of not being under city rule and having the ability to shoot a rattlesnake if I need to, because I'm not in the city limits. And I, again, agree with everyone. If it is annexed, then I think urban agriculture is the way to do it. I'm curious how many people you have heard from via the email, you know, saying that they were for or against it, because the meeting we went to previously, from everyone I saw, no one was interested in being annexed. So how many emails have you guys gotten for annexation?
It hasn't been a hot topic.
Have you heard from other people besides us about not annexing? No?
Not really.
Interesting. Okay. So at what point do we have to have the more than 50% to not move forward, or how does that happen?
I think what Mr. Henley explained is we don't really have that option.
Okay.
Because of those signed agreements that we realize many people haven't seen, but the property came with them.
Mm-hmm. They're going to get them to all of us.
Questions for Mr. Huff? Okay.
Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Anyone else here to speak in opposition? There being no others to speak in favor or in opposition to, I now declare the public hearing closed. Please read the ordinance by title only.
An ordinance approving the city-initiated annexation of properties along the west side of South Poplar Street, south of West 50th Street, and the zoning of said properties as urban agriculture.
Chair would entertain a motion to approve on first reading the ordinance just read.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Lutz, seconded by Councilman Hopkins. Discussion. Councilman Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Regarding an annexation, I previously lived out west of town in Westland Park. And in Westland Park, we were faced with a situation that we were going to have to do something with our water system and a number of septic tanks. I personally did not have a problem with the septic tank, but we had a number of people that did when you get down towards the highway. And it was getting to be a mess, and it was actually polluting groundwater pretty badly. We did have our own water system, but the water system was certainly not up to standards. And as a matter of fact, the water mains were made out of transite. So all of those transite pipes had to be replaced when we came into the city. And in fact, we did tie into this, everybody had to tie into the city because there was real problems with septic tanks. Not everybody, but it turned out to be a situation, and believe me, I was trying to sell my house when we were going through this. And so that made it a little difficult to sell a house when you're just in a transition period. And I don't deny that, but looking back, after I sold it after about a year, it was a matter of avoided costs. We were going to have to do something to a water system. We were going to have to do something with septic systems. And I look back what it would have cost each of us to do that, and it would have been a great deal more than what it cost to come into the city. The other thing we got out of it is we ended up paving streets, and that, of course, was paid for over the long term. But it turned out to be a good thing, and this was probably, I'm guessing at the time, it was probably 50 or 60 households, and maybe a little more than that. And it was the same time that Moonbeam Vapors also came into the city. So I kind of looked at it philosophically, looking back, that it was kind of an avoided cost that we'd have had to deal with someday. And I think it could be a similar situation when the folks on South Poplar were hooking up to the city. They were getting water, and they wouldn't have to have a well anymore, because wells are getting very sensitive, and they can be very expensive to maintain. So just another point of view from somebody who kind of went through it.
Other comments? Councilman Bates.
A question I have is, we did have that meeting. I was not able to attend to hear. If I remember correctly, it was at the start of the meeting that there was no issues. There wasn't going to be any problems with the annexation with this. That everybody seemed okay with that.
Well, I wouldn't characterize it that way, but I think the primary issue was people were concerned that with the proposed zoning, they wouldn't be able to put up an outbuilding, they wouldn't be able to change the number of animals they had because they would be grandfathered in with a certain number, but they couldn't change that number. And I think when we proposed the idea of urban agriculture, that took care of those objections. But that was the major concern, was the zoning, if I remember correctly, for those of you who were there.
Okay. The only reason why I bring it up is I brought up from the very get-go that I asked, was the people going to be contacted? I asked if they were going to be shown that in their contract when they bought the house, that when it came to when we would annex, it says in their contract that they would have to. I asked if that was going to be shown, and I want to say that I was told, yeah, we'll show it, or maybe if they ask for it, we'll show it. And then I also brought up the fact that if the majority of them did not want to be annexed, where we stood, and I still understand that the city has a choice, it can do it without it. I guess my problem with it is I've heard more against it than I have anyone for it. I know that this is part of the census, and that to me doesn't matter. I think hearing what they have to say, if they don't want to be annexed, personally, I think we should respect people that don't want to be annexed. But that's me personally. It's their land, it's their right. That's just how I feel, so.
Other comments? I wouldn't characterize the meeting as a meeting where people were excited about the annexation. But I do think we solved a lot of the problems with the urban agriculture zoning. And I haven't heard of anyone concerned about restrictions under that zoning classification. So.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman McKeon.
I guess the question that I have do all these properties now receive city services?
Water and in some cases, sanitation. Water and trash.
But all of them that we're looking at annexing do receive those?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Friel, the extension of water to those properties was done so under the condition that when council was prepared to annex and contiguity was met and so forth, that indeed council would have that option to exercise that, and that would happen without formal protest. That doesn't necessarily mean that people can't provide feedback, as we've heard tonight, but those were the auspices by which at least water services were extended to this part of the community.
Okay, so then I have two follow-up questions. So in receiving all those, then everybody has agreed, all of those properties in theory have agreed to be annexed into the city upon receiving those?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, that's correct. Now, that doesn't mean that the folks that are in this room signed those agreements, but it certainly does mean that the original property holders or the property holders of the day would have done that.
Okay. And then going back to what Councilman Hopkins was saying in your example with Westland, if I heard you right, when they went in and tied them into city services, they tied everybody in, whether or not the septics had failed, they were all tied in?
That's correct. Department of Environmental Quality got involved in taking samples, and there was high nitrates in a lot of the groundwater, And so those septics, not all of them, but a significant number on the northern edge had problems. And so we were required at that point to put in sewer. But that was a little different animal than what we have here. Until there's a problem, DEQ still has the ability to say, no, you're going to tear that out and hook into city sewer. And they've always had that ability. And that was part of our problem.
I guess what I'm getting at is like, one area that I have concern about is that in our report it said that it's up to the health department as to whether they have to tie in or not, if I read that correctly. And so if in this situation, if people are not tied in and they're on septic, but and correct me if I'm wrong, but if the health department comes in and says, well, everybody has to tie into the system, then it doesn't matter whether your septic's working or not. That's a cost. That's another cost for having to tie into the system. Am I looking at that correctly, or?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, what typically happens is when a septic system fails, the property owner needs to get a permit to either reconstruct the septic system or whatever in order to get back into service. The health department has been requiring, typically with regard to the DEQ requirements as well, that those services would be provided by a sewer service if it's within a certain distance of the property in question. The question isn't whether or not they are residents of the city. It's just whether or not they're within proximity of a sewer line. And so, yes, they would have that expense, the property owner would. But that wouldn't be because they are residents of the city. That would be because their septic has failed and they're within the proximity, whatever that is, of an existing sewer line.
Correct. So I guess my question is, because when I read this, it just doesn't seem that it's up to county health as to whether or not they have to tie into it. And I think it was like 300 feet that they have to be to tie in. But in this situation that Councilman Hopkins is talking about, whether they had failed systems or not, they all had to tie in. So is there a possibility that the county health could come in and say, now that you're being annexed in, we're going to require you to tie into the system? I mean, does that possibility lie out there? Because that would be an additional cost that would come to the property owners now, not when their system fails.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, I think that's incredibly unlikely. I don't know that the health department has that kind of authority even to exact that sort of expense upon somebody. It's certainly not a condition of annexation. So no, I don't think so.
They could do that as easily now as they could after annexation, if they so choose.
Mr. Mayor, only with conditions of the septic failing, right. Not because it's all of a sudden some sort of arbitrary time to do so.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
I'm sorry, Councilman Cathy.
Yes. I would believe that, for example, if they would start finding pollutant levels in Garden Creek that they could trace back to septic effluent, i.e. high nitrates, which was the situation that Councilman Hopkins was referring to, that WDEQ could come in and force them to tie into the sewer system. But it would have to be because of some other outlying polluting issue with the creek or the surrounding area. So they could be forced to, in answer to your question.
Other Councilman or Mr. City Manager?
But just as a point of clarification, Mr. Mayor and Councilman Cathy, I believe the question was directed at the health department, not DEQ. And so that's a significant difference in my world.
Yes, but I would think that you should be able to fight the health department for just, no, we want you on there.
I think, yes, and I think that's a completely different scenario, yeah.
Okay. And I just wanted to clarify something about the meeting to you, Councilman Bates, regarding the issue of the documentation as far as the signed agreements. I don't believe there was anybody in the meeting that didn't recognize that those documents existed. So they may not have had the physical copy, but I think there was general acknowledgement that that was in fact the case. Other discussion? I appreciate your concerns. I think one of the advantages people often cite when they are living in the county is they're not subject to city code enforcement, which is often a concern. And in my experience, code enforcement gets involved in people's properties when a neighbor complains. And typically when there are some pretty grievous situations that our code enforcement people aren't driving up and down Poplar or any other street looking for a code violation to enforce. They're far too busy with their own actual violations and complaints from neighbors and people in the neighborhood than to go out and harass someone that is just minding their own business and maintaining their property. And I don't know what the other concerns would be. I hope that you will all find that if this does pass, that it will actually financially be a benefit in terms of the water rate decreases versus the property tax increase, if there is some. So I will be voting yes. I don't know if there's any other discussion. We'll cast our votes. Councilman Cathy.
Is this a single reading issue, or is this?
No, it's three.
This is first reading.
This is first of three.
Okay. Along those lines, I will probably vote yes, but so that it isn't just a spur because of the 5 this evening, but there does seem to be still a lot of discussion and a lot of soul searching that needs to come before reading 2.
Particularly if there are some restrictions that urban agriculture places on you folks that we're not aware of. Please cast your vote.
Machine's on tilt.
Waiting on the computer.
Start that.
Do you need us to vote again? Please cast your vote.
There we go.
And please record the vote.
With Councilmember Bates voting nay, motion passed.
And we do have 2 more readings, folks. I now declare the public hearing open for the consideration of the plat of the Fairgrounds Home Addition Number 2. Mr. City Attorney, do you have exhibits?
Thank you, Your Honor. We have 2 exhibits. Exhibit number 1, correspondence from Liz Becker to J. Carter Napier, dated November 15, 2019. And exhibit number 2, affidavit of publication, is published in the Casper Star Tribune, dated November 18, 2019.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of the council, this particular ordinance, if approved, does include a vacation and a replat of the area being described and what you'll see here on your screen in just a minute, as well as a subdivision agreement that establishes this subdivision into the community. This is an area that will replat a portion of our community near the fairgrounds in such a way that there will be multiple residences and so forth built into the area as suggested by this proposed plat, and would likely mimic what we saw from the petitioner in the model of twin homes and so forth adjacent to this neighborhood. Planning Commission reviewed this and approved, and we would suggest the same for you tonight.
Thank you. Council will now listen to public comment. Again, public comments are limited to 5 minutes, and please no duplication. At this time, I would ask those individuals who wish to speak in favor of the issues involving the plat to please approach the lectern. Is anyone here this evening to speak in favor? Good evening, sir.
Hello, my name is Steve Grimshaw. I am the owner-developer of that property. I live on Linden Way in that subdivision development. What we're doing is vacating lots 1, 2, 3, 28, and 29 of the Fairgrounds Plaza Edition number 1 in order to open that up to 17 additional lots, twin home lots, and develop that as a single-family, one-level twin home development. Initially, I had proposed to put a multifamily senior housing complex in there, which I decided to just build out and sell to individuals due to the desire of the buyers of the existing subdivision that we're building. So currently, out of the 28 houses that we built, there's 8 remaining to be sold. So.
Okay, thank you. Questions for Mr. Grimshaw? Councilman Bates.
I'm excited for the twin homes, so thank you for looking at developing that. That's awesome. I do want to say I am disappointed to hear about the senior housing for, or center or whatever, apartment for them. I was looking forward to seeing something built for the seniors, but am excited that you are developing that, and thank you.
Well, and there has been an approved development on Outer Drive
and Kaufman.
So there will be some additional affordable senior housing built. So it's just not going to be me.
Could you characterize the demographics of the people that you're finding that you're selling these homes to?
Most of the individuals are older. These houses are one level, barrier free. They all have 2-bedroom, 2 baths. They're 36-inch wide doors in most cases, and single and double stall garages, which just affords an elderly person the ability to traverse their homes and utilize them in their full capacities, as opposed to looking up and down stairs thinking, which direction do I want to go, and be captured in their own homes without being able to utilize the whole thing. So
it's kind of senior housing light.
It is senior housing light, yes.
Okay.
But it's available to all demographics.
Right.
And it is a for sale project. It's not a rental project.
I've heard some very nice things about these units.
Thank you very much. We're doing the absolute best that we can do, and providing the the best quality project that we can build. All the houses are, the dirt is, we have boring samples, for bearing capacities of the foundations, and we're doing everything to ensure that the end user has the best product for long life within that house. So.
Okay. Any other questions from Mr. Grimshaw? Thank you, sir.
Great, thank you very much.
Is anyone else here to speak in favor of the issues involving this plat? Is anyone here to speak in opposition to the issues involving the plat? There being no others to speak for or against, I now declare the public hearing closed. Please read the ordinance by title only.
An ordinance approving the Fairgrounds Home Edition Number 2 subdivision agreement and the vacation of a portion of the Fairgrounds Home Edition and final plat of the Fairgrounds Home Edition Number 2 comprising 2.17 acres more or less.
Thank you. The chair would now entertain a motion to approve on first reading the ordinance just read.
So moved. Second.
I didn't catch. Moved by Councilman Pacheco and seconded by Councilman Hopkins. How's that? Okay.
It all works out.
Discussion? Councilman Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just like to thank Mr. Grimshaw. He's taken the bull by the horns in a lot of housing in Casper. I think well, I don't know for sure, this is probably your 5th or 6th project in Casper, with several of them being located right downtown. And this one is, I've been through the model home they have, and it's really great. It's something that seniors would certainly like to live in because it's all one level. The only criticism I have is we need more of this right downtown. But thank you, Mr. Grimshaw, for what you're doing for the city. Appreciate it.
And there is developable land downtown, Mr. Grimshaw, so there is developable land downtown. Don't know if it's for sale or not, but I agree with Councilman Hopkins. That is our next housing challenge. Any other discussion? Councilman Friel.
Your Honor, on this, again, being a development, I'm going to abstain from voting on this.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion, amendments? Please cast your vote, and please record the vote.
With the abstention of Councilmember Friel voted, motion passed.
I now declare the public hearing open for the consideration of the annexation of the Ely Edition. Mr. City Attorney, do you have exhibits?
Thank you, Your Honor. We have 2 exhibits. Exhibit number 1, correspondence from Liz Becker to J. Carter Napier, dated November 27, 2019. And exhibit number 2, affidavit of publication, is published in the Casper Star Tribune, dated November 18, 2019.
I have to interrupt for just a second. Sir, before you leave, wasn't that a great game last night that the Seahawks took care of for us? Okay. Okay. I'm sorry. That was a big game, though. Okay. I'm sorry. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. In this particular scenario, the petitioner is planning on subdividing a 2-acre parcel into 2 single-acre parcels. The petitioner is requesting an R2 zoning classification, and the Planning Commission has reviewed this and approved it, and we would recommend the same again for you this evening.
Thank you. Council will now listen to public comment. Public hearing comments, again, are limited to 5 minutes, and I would ask those individuals who wish to speak in favor of the issues involving the annexation to please approach the lectern. Anyone here to speak in favor? Good evening.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, my name is Brad Holwagner with WLC Engineering. I'm located at 200 Pronghorn here in Casper. The owner was not, the owner's out of town tonight and was not able to be present, but I'd like to answer any questions that you may have about the property.
Okay. Any questions from Mr. Olheiser?
Holwagner.
Holwagner. Okay. Any questions? Apparently not. But thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Anyone else here to speak in favor of the issues involving this annexation? Is there anyone here to speak in opposition to the issues involving this annexation? There being no one others to speak for or against, I now declare the public hearing closed. Please read the ordinance by title only.
An ordinance approving the annexation, plat, and subdivision agreement for the Ely Edition and zoning said addition R2 1-unit residential.
Thank you. The chair would entertain a motion to approve on first reading the ordinance just read.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Bates, seconded by Councilwoman Lutz. Any discussion? Any amendments? Please cast your vote, and please record the vote.
All members voting aye, motion passed.
Thank you. Please read the ordinance on second reading by title only.
An ordinance approving a plat, subdivision agreement, and zone change creating the DeWall Divide Addition subdivision.
Chair would entertain a motion to approve on second reading the ordinance just read.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Friel, seconded by Councilman Bates. And we will again listen to public comment on this matter with comments limited to 5 minutes. Is there anyone here to speak regarding the second reading of the DeWall Divide Addition? Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Councilman, Councilwoman. I am David DeWald, and I am the petitioner for this property. I'm here to answer any questions you have, but
You know, they got a lot of stories, and some of them start out, a funny thing happened on the way to the city council meeting. And that happened at the last meeting, because at the last meeting, I was asked to come down and pick up this, which you probably all know about, you know, the D-Wall Divide Edition subdivision agreement. Got this the day before the last meeting, and I'd never seen one of these. I didn't really know what it meant, or whether it was standard issue or it was something everybody was just making up. So I took it down to Worthington Land Art and Carpenter. I showed it to him. He says, yeah, that's standard boilerplate stuff, except for section 6. He says, I'm not sure why you have a section 6 in yours, but I wouldn't sign it. So I got to thinking about it and came to the meeting, and Mr. Hanley here talked about the articles that you talk about when you're going to present one of these, and it was just not so forthcoming about this property. I just thought it was odd that he didn't have much to say about it. And the reason I thought it was odd is because Mr. Hanley and I have had 4 meetings about this property and the encroachment of the golf course Quonset hut fertilizer storage building that is encroaching on this piece of property.
Can you identify this section again that you're referring to in the document? The agreement.
Section 6, is it not on yours?
Section 6, is that part of our packet?
I'm having a hard time finding it.
Okay.
That's because it's not standard procedure for this kind of a hearing with a replat rezone. And so anyway, I had 4 separate meetings with Mr. Henley, and on those 4 meetings, he told me 4 different things. 4 different things. It's like he couldn't make up his mind what he wanted to say about it. And I went into those meetings with good faith, with good intentions, because I had found out when I purchased the property that I made the school district survey the property, and that's when we found out that there was encroachment there. And so I came into this to negotiate and come to an agreement, because negotiations are always better than litigations, in my opinion. And believe me, I've spent a lot of time in court. Anyway, now 8 months later, I get that section 6 in there. And so I read through it, and then I had to go to the meeting, and you guys all passed it on first reading, which I appreciate it, because it's a cut and dry thing. We got one piece of property, we're gonna try to divide it into 3. Nothing to it. And so now I've been in Elkhorn, and I get this email. I got a call from Craig Collins saying that Mr. Henley wanted to talk to me. I just got back today from Elkhorn, and I said, email it to me, let me see what it is. So he scans a copy of the complaint that I got today. Again, on the way to the council meeting, a funny thing happened. So this was filed on the 15th of November. I have not been served papers on this, but I now have a scanned copy of this complaint saying that the city owns this piece of property, which I agree, they do own the part that's on city property. But we're not going to argue about that. What we are going to argue about, or not even argue about, but something I feel real strongly about, that the fact that this is a process, this is a rezone replat process. And if we're going to conjoin a lawsuit with replat rezone, that is complete unprofessionalism and it's discriminatory. And if the city of Casper is trying to extort that piece of land from me, I mean, we can do that in court, but it shouldn't be here. It shouldn't be a part of the rezone replat process. If you want to sue me, that's fine. But it shouldn't be contingent on signing the agreement to the replat rezone, because that's blackmail. If I don't sign this and agree to let the city sue me, then this ain't gonna pass. And I have a real problem with that. And if you, Mr. Mayor, and the council know about this, then shame on you. That's all I gotta say. But more importantly, I have to say shame on John, because I went in there with open mind to negotiate an agreement
Councilman Hopkins, I'm sorry, could you explain your point of order?
Point of order, shame on John, I don't like that kind of language in here.
Okay, okay. Continue, sir.
Okay, so anyway, that's my thing. I hope you pass this on second reading, or we get a chance to talk to me or talk to John about it. But these guys should not be conjoined. It should not be part of this process. There's a process for one thing, there's a process for the other thing, but they shouldn't be conjoined because, again, that's discriminatory toward me, and I don't appreciate it being tied into this as a point of extortion.
Well, you wouldn't be asked to sign this until after third reading, and so we'll have, is that correct, sir? Mr. Henley?
Your Honor, that would not be correct. He would have to sign this before it goes to third reading. And, Your Honor, this is the section he's talking about simply says that we are putting the people on notice that may be looking at the subdivision agreement, and that if it needs to be modified because the city would prevail at a court hearing, then the city would look to Mr. DeWald to correct the legal description, which is in error, or vice versa. If Mr. DeWald's trust were to prevail, then the city would pay for that. We're just being very even, Stephen, there. Nothing tricky about it, nothing extortion about it. We're basically just saying, like any other provision, if you prevail at court, we pay. If we prevail at court, you're going to pay. And just for the replatting of it.
Okay.
Don't forget that if I prevail, we're going to cut 19 feet off that building, or we're going to move it. Or as I told John a year ago, I'm more than glad to rent it to him. And at this point, he's 12 months in arrears at $400 a month.
Okay, we of course can't discuss any potential litigation here, as you know. So, do you understand what Mr. Henley's saying as far as just stating that if it went to court, we would abide by our responsibilities depending on the outcome, and you would have to abide by yours depending on the outcome, as well, the way I'm hearing this?
And that's true. And going to court is a separate thing. That piece of property is still going to be there. It's just going to be one lot instead of the whole lot. Okay? We're still going to argue about that Quonset hut, whether it's in lot one or if it's in the whole piece. And I don't think that we should be holding up the division of the replat rezone just because the city wants to sue me.
It's on the agenda tonight. Councilman Lutz, did you have a question or comment?
Is the subdivision agreement in last meeting's packet? Sorry, it's not in here, and so I don't know what section 6 looks like or what the wording is, and so I don't have a point of reference.
It was in last meeting's packet.
Okay, I just didn't want to start digging for it and get confused and lost.
Councilman Cathy.
Prior, you said you and the school district had the property surveyed.
That's correct.
Did you know before you purchased that property that that Quonset hut was on school district property at that time?
Yes, when the survey came back, we saw the encroachment.
So you knew when you purchased it that Quonset hut was on the property that you were purchasing?
I knew at that time that when the Quonset hut was purchased, process wasn't followed and the city didn't build it on their property.
Point of order, Councilman. I think this is this is a line of questioning that may be something that would actually be heard in court if it went there, rather than we going down that road now. Mr. Henley's explanation, it doesn't sound like extortion. To me, it sounds like just a statement of fact that it could go to court.
It could go to court. And I haven't been served. I did get a scanned copy today. Okay. And I did see in the minutes earlier that you guys talked about okaying executive session, land items, and litigation. So maybe you all know about it anyway. Whether it goes to court or not is unbeknownst to me, because again, when I started this a year ago, I came into the office of the city attorney under good faith, willing to negotiate the 4 choices. And all 4 times, he had a different answer, from adverse possession, to I've been authorized to pay this, to we're not gonna do a thing, to it's the school board's problem. Seems confused.
Well, we have to decide what to do about this problem.
Yep.
But before us tonight is approval of your request that we approve this replatting.
That's correct.
And passed on first ordinance, and I don't hear anyone commenting on an objection to continuing this process on second reading, unless I'm misreading the intent of council. That is, that it still appears to be an action that the council supports, based on what I've heard so far. And so what I would advise is that we simply move forward with our second reading, and if there is some other discussion that needs to happen, because you are correct, that is a completely separate matter from whether this plat is approved by the council, which is what is before us this evening. And so I would suggest that we simply move forward with this process, and then we deal with this complex matter involving the Quonset hut in a separate manner, whether that's in court or through some other negotiations. It does not involve whether your plat is appropriate or whether council would in any way intervene with your plan.
Thank you.
Is that a fair discussion?
That is absolutely fair. That's why I came to discuss this, in case anybody wasn't aware of everything else that has transpired.
But to my reading, based on Mr. Henley's review of this clause, it's really simply stating we're all going to abide by the results of a court action if a court action is undertaken.
We have to do that anyway, and it still has nothing to do with a replat rezone.
I would read it, I would have heard it as, just so you know. That's what it sounds like to me.
Now we all know.
So, okay. So, any other discussion on this matter?
I can call the question.
Yes, thank you. Let's,
Your Honor.
I'm sorry?
Do you have communication from anyone else?
Thank you. Is there anyone else here to speak in favor of the issues involving the DeWald addition? Anyone else to speak on this matter? Okay, there being no others, and any other further discussion amongst council? Please cast your vote, and please record the vote.
All members voting aye, motion passed.
Please read the ordinance on first reading by title only.
An ordinance amending the Casper Municipal Code pertaining to 30 and 40 mile per hour speed zones.
Chair would entertain a motion to approve on first reading the ordinance just read.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Bates, seconded by Councilman Friel. Mr. City Manager, do you have a report for us this evening?
I thought we were on second reading of this item.
This is second reading.
I think.
Oh,
Sorry.
Okay,
Item 10B.
I do that. I skip ahead to the next page when there's something on the bottom of the page. My bad. I'm sorry. Please read the ordinance on second reading by title only.
An ordinance amending the Casper Municipal Code pertaining to 30 and 40 mile per hour speed zones.
Okay. The chair would entertain a motion to approve on second reading the ordinance just read.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councilman Cathy, seconded by Councilman Friel, I think. Council will now listen to public comment. Any comment on these speed zone changes this evening? Okay. Any discussion amongst council? Any amendments? Please cast your vote. And please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passed.
Okay. Now, please read the ordinance on first reading by title only.
An ordinance amending the Casper Municipal Code pertaining to the salary of the mayor.
Chair would entertain a motion to approve on first reading the ordinance just read.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Pacheco, seconded by Councilman Hopkins. Mr. City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, excuse me. This ordinance proposes that, consistent with Wyoming statute for the form of government that we are a part of, the mayor's salary is allowed to be increased upon direction of the council to twice of what it is that the city council earns on a per meeting basis. in this regard, that would mean that if this ordinance passes, that the mayor's salary, and it wouldn't be current Mayor Powell's salary, by the way, would be increased to $300 per meeting. And with that, Mr. Mayor, I defer back to the council.
Okay. Council will now listen to public comment. Public comments again are limited to 5 minutes. Is anyone here to speak on this matter this evening? Okay, discussion amongst council. Councilman Bates.
I don't agree with it, and for one reason only. As I mentioned before and many other things, with all the finances that we're going to be asking the citizens of Casper, or for 1 cent or whatever, however it's all paid for, to add an additional, and I know it's not very much, but to just add more to it, I can't justifiably say yes to this. Maybe another time, once projects are completed, and I know that there's always going to be a project, but with the amount of projects and the amount of money that we're looking at, I know this is very insignificant, but every bit always counts, in my opinion. So, for me, I will vote no for this go around.
Other comments? Councilman Pacheco.
As a former mayor, I'm going to support this, and for a couple different reasons. One is I think it's a very lost my train of thought for a second. I do believe that it's a conservative move. It's okay for us to be able to do that for the mayor, the time and the effort that the mayor does put in, the time of going from meetings. I know earlier on, Mrs. Mundell had mentioned that you sign up for it. It's true, we do sign up for when we know that we take a hit, when we know that we're getting just a small stipend for this, but we also know that we put the time and the effort in. The mayor who runs the meetings goes to several meetings, can be 20 to 30 hours extra a week on top of, especially if they have a full-time job. I think that it's a compensation that's it's well thought out, and we need to have that for our mayor. So I'm very much supportive of it, and I think it's okay. So,
other discussion. Councilman Hopkins.
I concur.
And I would like to add, I was the one who suggested this. I'm going to be mayor for another 3 weeks, so not relevant for me. But I do think if you look at the age of the people up here, that councils of this of our makeup tend to be older, tend to be in a position where maybe we're not all working full-time, and maybe we're not making the same sacrifices. And obviously, an extra $100 a week isn't necessarily going to be compensation for someone in a younger age group, but it might just be enough to make a difference where someone can say, it's a sacrifice, but I think I can justify it with that amount of compensation, because obviously all of us take essentially a financial hit based on other things we could be doing with this time. But I suggested it for those reasons. It is still a very small amount of compensation relative to the time involved. And I don't believe there's ever a time when public officials can pass an increase in their compensation where the optics are good. No one ever likes to see that at any level of government, and yet there are times when it's appropriate. So I will vote for it. Any other discussion? Amendments? Please cast your vote, and please record the vote.
Councilmember Friel abstaining and Councilmember Bates voting nay. Motion passed.
Thank you. I want to make sure I'm on the right page here. Okay. Council will now consider consent resolutions. Do any council members wish to remove any item from the consent agenda?
Okay, please read the consent resolutions by title only.
Item 12A1, outside city sewer service with Rubis Land Company LLC. Item 12A2, a procurement agreement with Cub Water Resources for Z-Tag Polymer. Item 12A3, the contract for ice slicer delivery with Desert Mountain Corporation. Item 12A4, professional service agreements for wrecker services with All Around Towing, Transport and Recovery, E&F Towing, MAD Transportation and Towing, as well as On the Hook Recovery and Transport. Item 12A5, an agreement with Graves Consulting LLC to conduct a compensation and classification study.
Chair would entertain a motion to adopt the consent resolutions just read.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Friel, seconded by Councilman Cathy. Mr. City Manager, do you have anything to explain or add about these consent resolutions?
Mr. Mayor, just a point of information. You see in here tonight an agreement for outside city sewer service. You will see annexation agreements, and you probably have seen annexation agreements for outside city services that all contain language that suggest these services would be rendered upon an agreement to annex at some point in the future at the discretion of the council of the day, despite who might be the owner of the day. And so these agreements are not made in the dark, they're not made without their knowledge, and they're certainly not made without the understanding of the future implications that these things hold for the citizens of Casper. I just want to make that point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Of people who already have access to city services, parks, police, etc. Thank you. Any abstentions or nay votes? Please cast your vote, and please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passed.
Please read the consent minute action titles.
Item 13A1, rejecting the bids for the CY Booster Station Replacement Project. And item 13A2, authorizing the reappointment of Mark Pepper to the Economic Development Joint Powers Board.
Chair would entertain a motion to approve the consent minute action agenda items just read.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Pacheco, seconded by Councilwoman Lutz. Any abstentions or nay votes? Please cast your vote, and please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passed.
At this time, we ask council members to bring forward relevant concerns or items of interest. Councilman Hopkins, would you start us this evening?
Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Councilman Cathy.
The only thing I would like to say, and this is not a shot across the bow by any means to our one of our council members, but it sounds like our real estate personnel within the city need to do a little more due diligence when they're selling properties that are contingent, that are county properties, but contingent with the city, to start letting these people know about all of the agreements that have come along with these things. Because that's the big concern tonight, is these people willingly bought properties not being aware of the commitments that had been made and that are enforceable by prior owners. Just like easements or anything else, they are enforceable and stay with the property. And it sounds like maybe our real estate personnel citywide need to be a little more diligent in some of these things as time progresses.
Well said. Agreed.
And like I said, nothing personal.
Councilwoman, anything else, Councilman Cathy? Councilwoman Lutz?
Just a huge thank you to the snowplow crews. I think we all know that they have just been working nonstop, taking calls on roads that were impassable. I live up on Casper Mountain Road towards the mountain, and so I very much appreciate it, because otherwise there's no way with the wind up there that any of us were getting out.
Well said. Councilman Bates?
The only thing that I have is Mr. Brennan. He was the gentleman during the summer that had a truck hit the curb, flew into his house, into his bedroom when he was sleeping. And he gave me a call. He called me, left a message, so I called him back. And he just wanted to point out that when we look at neighborhoods and city putting in new streets in neighborhoods, to not make them narrow like his street is. He was just not, he just wanted me to put that forth of any new development that's going on and new streets that our engineers or whoever designs it will make them wider, much wider than what his street is. I think there's a new, where there's a point that has to be 28 feet now currently. Larger than that, okay. So, but he just wanted me to bring that up, that that's a concern, and he may be in at some point to speak on it. Other than that, I echo Lutz of our city plows doing a great job.
Thank you. Councilman Pacheco.
I wasn't quite eloquent. I don't know why my brain was not firing the right synapses. It wasn't quite as eloquent when I was expressing my support for the mayor's salary. So I just wanted to again say that it's a pragmatic approach, and it's not we're going crazy spending all this money. I think we need to get away from that idea. I think we do a very good job. The city does. We get kind of hammered for this. Do a very good job of making sure we're very point what we do with our money, how we do that. Carter and his team are very, very good at that. And so we always kind of get that shot that we're spending. I don't think that that's the case. And I think that that's a narrative that's out there in the community that I think that we need to continue to say, you know what, we do pretty darn good managing that. We're in the black and we do the things that we need to, by and large, because of Carter and his staff and what they do. So that needs to be said. So $300 a meeting is not going crazy spending a ton of money. I think it's a pragmatic approach, and I think it's good for the mayor. Second thing is that, unfortunately, I try to stay off of Facebook as much as I can, but I was not just saddened by some of the remarks that were made about our city employees and the people clearing the streets. I cannot begin to tell you, I sit there and I read some of those comments, the hard work that these people do to clear these streets. And I want to continue to echo our support for the work that they do, the time away from their families over a holiday weekend. I think it's critical that we understand that that's hard work. So I want to be able to do that for clearing the road for the parade, for the work that they did in the main streets and everything else, to be able to do that. So I echo that support, and I hope that they understand and know that the council supports them wholeheartedly for everything they did.
Well said. Councilman Friel.
I'll echo exactly what everybody up here said, and I think that the crews have actually worked around the clock for several days. It's a crazy amount of snow that we got out there, and so hats off to them. To rebut what you were just saying, I guess I have a question. When these annexation agreements are executed, are those filed anywhere besides here? Are they filed in with the county, or I guess officially filed is the word I'm looking for?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, the answer is yes. To give you more detail as to where and how and at what point the owner or potential owner runs into that document, I'd probably have to get back to you on that. But we do try to take a lot of diligence to make sure that those documents follow the title of the property and remain clear as to what authority they have with regard to that particular parcel, whatever it might be.
Okay, so just to finish on that, you know, as real estate agents can only do so much. If they're informed that there's actually an annexation agreement in place, yeah, they should pass it on, and they should be asking if you're selling a property that could potentially be annexed or have that agreement in place. They should look into that and pass that on. However, generally it comes down to a title company doing a search, just like they would for to find if there's easements. We're looking at encroachments, whatever it might be. They'll look at those, and if potentially, and that's why I ask if it's filed anywhere, because that's something that, if filed properly, it would be on a title commitment that would tell people that yes, in fact, you do have, and unless a homeowner or soon-to-be homeowner if they don't read what that title commitment says, they may not know that there's an annexation agreement in place. So I wouldn't necessarily blast every realtor out there and say that it's their responsibility. It really would probably come down to a title commitment itself and looking into that to make sure that those are in place. So, but if they're not, we should correct that and find a way, or make sure that those do get picked up when these properties are sold. That's it.
I'll echo the remarks. While I was out of town, I was amazed to see what things were like when I came back, and you all survived a pretty major storm while I was gone. So, again, kudos to our staff who worked very hard. So, and I would like to point out to council that we do not have an executive session this evening. So that's a good thing. The next meetings of the Casper City Council will be a work session to be held at 4:30 p.m. Tuesday, December 10, 2019 in the council's meeting room, and a regular council meeting to be held at 6 p.m. Tuesday, December 17, 2019 in the council chambers. The chair would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
By Councilman Cathy, seconded by Councilman Friel. Please cast your vote, and please record the vote.
Oh, sorry.
With all members voting aye, motion passed.
Meeting is adjourned.